Hello everybody, my name is Mofis Dawson, and in this video I will be discussing and relating a few things about the Norse god Odin, and I will be relating a few things that I learned from him, and I will explain how he is a really good and a really highly sought after idol for any sort of black magician who are searching for sorcery. So first, before saying anything, I will give a little bit of explanation about myself. I am Morpheus. I have practices and I am experienced in Kabbalah, Qliphoth, sorcery of various kinds, American magic, and Western ceremonial magic is something that I'm really experienced in, or you can say I'm proud of that. And my experience in the native and my European and native Indian practices, which I learned a lot from. I am today, honestly, I cannot speak properly for some reason. For let's say that I know a lot about the things that I'm talking about, and currently I am going through a path walking by Odin, and I'm going and working with various of the gods of the Norse pantheon. So let's go first and discuss how and why I am saying that Odin is a really good black magician archetype. When we see any sort of magic or any sort of sorcery in modern times, we are seeing that there is this thing called the Qliphoth, which is really getting more well known due to the work of Astronaut Mason, V.K. Jahanam, and various other magicians. Also, however, we are seeing the rise of the inverse tree, which is the false form of the Qliphoth. And the truth is that the Qliphoth is not the reverse tree, like it's not like at the bottom. It's the exact opposite of Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. And while we can say that it is kind of inverse, the idea that it is exactly the opposite is not true, because the Tree of Life and the Tree of Death both are connected to the same spears. And while we can see that there are certain changes in different spears, like there's a spear of sun in the Tree of Life Sephiroth, and there is a spear of the black sun in the Qliphoth. We are not seeing a black sun. Actually, we are seeing darkest and the darker part of the sun, which we will talk about later. So what is Odin and how does he get associated with the Qliphoth then? Odin, you must have to understand first that the Odin we now know in various other neo-paganism and in Asatru is not the Odin of the old. Odin, like many other pagan gods, has gone through many and lot of changes in his own life, in his cycle. The Odin that once existed first was Wodanas. Wodanas was the first wild god, the god of the hunt and the god of death. He was the ecstasy of man. He was the nature's most primal form that it takes when it attacks people. That is how Odin was always related. But then there were changes due to the centuries. He became a war god. Then he became the god of skalds or poets. And then with the rise of Christianity, he was associated more with the Judeo-Christian god. And while some of his aspects like his darkness and his really dark habits were hidden, there were a lot of stories about how Odin became a really light god, or like he was more seen as all father than the shamanic magician that he is. Like, what am I saying? You will ask that why am I saying that Odin can be dark? Like, how can Odin be dark? He's the all father, he created the world. Actually, the thing is that when we read about Asgard and Odin, we learn that Odin, while he spent a lot of time in Asgard to help his people, he also spent a lot of time outside. He was traveling as a really nameless man who was traveling throughout the lands and learning knowledge. That is how we know. Like, most of the important and most of the well-known stories about Odin are related to that. When we have the story of Mimiswell, We see that Odin went to the well of Mimir, then he sacrificed one of his eyes to gain knowledge. It's not even the most famous one. The most famous one would be the story of how he sacrificed himself to himself for the runes, which is a really interesting connection that we can see with the Judeo-Christian mythology, with Jesus sacrificing himself to God, to himself for salvation. But Odin did not do that for salvation of others. Odin is archetype of the magician. He is the tarot aspect of the magician. He studies everything. He sacrifices himself, but it is to gain more knowledge. Why and how? When we see the aspect of Odin, he is not light at all. While he is, technically he brings order, so you will be asking why would a god who brings order would be dark. We have to understand something which Odin taught me, I think that everybody in the world needs to know, is that darkness and light both are not the truth. They can be interpreted differently, but the truth in the entire world is chaos and order. And order does not mean light. Order means something which is really balanced. And how can we see order? Like, try to understand, for example, this is something that I found out. Light is not actually order, light is actually chaos. While we see the void as darkness, as chaos, the void and dark is actually more order, because try to feel nothingness. When you do any sort of meditation to the void, you will sense that you can be more calm. You can be like a single bowl of water which does not have any movement. But when we feel the fire of the sun, the stars, the water starts bubbling up. This is chaos. Chaos is not light, or chaos is not dark. Actually, chaos is light. And chaos and order are similar to each other, and they must be together for harmony to be achieved in the world. Something Odin told me is that order cannot come without chaos. You have to take the chaos and then turn it into order. That is what he did. With the death of Ymir, the world was created and Odin became a wanderer. Odin's job was not that of just as a normal warrior or as a god. He was always searching for knowledge like a black magician does. We all, if you are watching this video, you are a magician and you are seeing and you are desiring knowledge in the world. Like, I'm pretty sure that you know and you desire to summon demons or summon gods to gain more knowledge about certain things. But what is this actually in the end? How would it help you? Odin travels the world. He gains knowledge just so that he can change Ragnarok. And he wants to survive. He does not want everybody to die. He does not care for others actually, but if he gets the chance, he would save them. But it's also true that he would not care if he can survive and the others die. That is a true part of a black magician. Salvation through damnation. And you can say that Odin, is there any story of Odin being a really bad god or doing something that is immoral? We have to see the story of how Odin gained the meed of poetry for that. Just a simple story. I will simplify it a little bit. There was a god who was murdered by two dwarves, and his body and blood was taken in 3 jars. Okay. All right, and the jars were then given to a Jotnar, and the Jotnar had a daughter named Gunnlod. Gunnlod had the 3 jars in her room, and she was guarding the jars. Odin, he transformed himself into a Jotnar, and he seduced Gunnlod for 3 whole nights, and at the end of each night, he would drink one of the jars. That is how Odin worked. Odin is not your normal good god. Odin has done bad things. He has done things which are reprehensible, but in the end, it was just for his sake of knowledge, like a magician does. We have to go through our inner darkness. In the Qliphoth, In Thaumaelic sense, Odin would be the archdemon of Thaumael if he was a demon, because Odin has gone through all of the darkness in his life just to gain the light in the end. He has become a god, and he helps every single magician in the world go through the same cycle. He wants every single magician to go through that. He wants us to travel, to learn, and to become a really good sorcerer in the end. But how can we do that? And why don't we accept Odin then? Odin is not an easy god to work with. Odin's abilities are really different. He is not a single god like most other pantheons. Like even in the majority Christian pantheon, you will see that the Judeo-Christian god has gone through some changes. The old god was more angry, but the new god is now more loving. But Odin has gone through more changes than you can think of. He has been the god of necromancy, he has been the god of skulls, he has been the god of battle frenzy, he has been the god of warriors and kings, he has been the god of thieves and magicians. Odin is really different. Odin is not like a simple normal god. Like, he does not take any single attribute. What Odin does is gone through every single thing and learned from it. That is a path of a true magician. If you can respect the cultures of who you are taking the magic from, and it's just for your own salvation, then personally I would suggest you to do that. But if you are torturing other people, if you are hurting them and gaining the knowledge just for your profit, then you don't deserve the knowledge. The knowledge in the end is for the magician, for the practitioner, and the knowledge that you gain from the others, you have to ask for permission before you share that. Because I have seen many people in the modern world nowadays who are not doing the same thing. They're taking knowledge from other people and then they are just selling the knowledge just for getting a quick buck. But you have to understand that magic is not just a simple thing. It's all around us. It's in everything. In the rings, in the guitar that I have, in everything. Magic is around us. It's in every single thing that we have. But we are not using that. The Odin's work started when he came from Ginnungagap. Odin's essence is immortal. He was born from Ginnungagap, and his dark shadow, his blood brother, Loki, he will one day bring him back to it. He will kill Odin in the end by Fenris. But how can we go through now? How can we learn from Odin then? What would you tell others who want to learn about Odin? What should you do if you want to learn and work with Odin? I would suggest everybody to, if they want to work with any sort of gods of the old pantheons, to just be warrior-like. Your soul needs to be that of a warrior. I'm not a typical warrior. I'm a teenager in my home. I am more lazy than the old people, my ancestors, but what I have is much more different than what they have. I have more mental fortitude, which I can use to gain more powers. Physical life, it can be useful, but you have to remember that macrocosm and microcosm is the same in the end. If you change yourself from the mind, then your body will change with it. A sorcerer is a god of the mind, then he becomes a god of the body. That is how Odin did. You want to work with Odin? If you want to become like Odin, if you want to work with him, you have to first understand that there are things that are beyond you, first of all. But then you have to take that as a goal and you have to go through that. You might never find the answers, but it is your goal to gain that. And see, if you find that there is struggle in the end, you have to go through that, because struggle will breed true warriors. For example, Odin is not a single easy god to work with. He's not an easy god to imitate. But the true warriors who can stand in his presence and demand answers and fight like a warrior with him, they will get the answers. And Odin will guide them till the end, until the world collapses in the end. And how would you do that? How would we associate and work with Odin then, if Odin is kind of similar to the Clifford? You have to understand that Odin, while being similar to the Qliphoth, is not a Qliphothic entity. He is a god, and if you want to gain his guidance, you have to do a symbol invocation. Just use similar techniques that you have for demons, and then invoke Odin, and then gain his knowledge. You will not be able to gain that. Norse sorcery is full of trials, and you have to do a lot of trials, which will break you, your physical and mental fortitude, and then what you gain from that, it will be tested time and time again until you can be sure that you are strong enough. You will be the coal which will be burnt and heated and pressurized until it can become a diamond, the black diamond of magical sorcery. For Odin, and for becoming a really powerful sorcerer, if you want to work with Odin or learn from him, first learn that anything is possible. Just don't let society dictate anything. Odin learned magic, not just simple magic like Galdur of the runes which he invented, but he learned magic of the Norse. He learned Seidir. Seidir is something which only women knew because it is associated with weaving. But Odin learned that. Why? Because it is knowledge in the end. Knowledge is the biggest thing. And you must realize that Odin has only one formula, one eternity of learning and doing the same thing. That is his formula that you must learn in the end. It will change you, and it is the only formula that you must learn until the day you die. The formula is that the only knowledge, or the only good is knowledge, and the only evil is ignorance. Socrates, but Odin is really associated with that line to me because I have learned that this is the absolute truth in the world. Like, the absolute truth is chaos and change. The absolute truth of life is that knowledge is the true good and evil is ignorance.